Over the next few weeks, I will be sharing a series of discussions with several of my friends on mission titled How a Disciple Making Movement, or DMM, helps to meet the needs of the community. Each of the guests live in neighborhoods, communities, and cultures within those communities with a diversity of people and needs. And they are all representing Christ and helping bring his peace in ways that are culturally relevant and theologically sound. I am excited to share this with you and encourage you not to miss any of the episodes with the guest in this series. Now prepare to engage with this week's episode. My name is Thomas Clark, and welcome to the Takeoff podcast, where myself and guests help equip you to bring the peace of God to the place you live, work, learn, and play, all for his glory. Every problem is a discipleship problem. Being a disciple of Christ does not guarantee that we will not have problems. It does, however, give us the tools to face the challenges of life that come our way. My worldview is that Christ transforms culture, and he does it through his followers. The goal of Takeoff is to equip you for movemental thinking when it comes to making disciples. This is season 4, and I am excited about all the possibilities and everything we have lined up for this season. Okay, let's get into it. And we're doing something a little different this part of the season, as I've been promising you all that I'm going to have some other friends on mission who will be on and share. And we've done in the past with Stephen Bonner, and then schedules hadn't really lined up with some other friends on mission. But I'm so glad to be able to have the person who is with me right now. This young lady is someone who's not just a friend on mission, but she's really doing a wonderful job in where she lives, work, learn, and play in terms of disciple making. And again, if your first time here, this podcast, Takeoff podcast, is all about making disciples, specifically through a disciple making movement. And if you have been here before, then you know that we do our best to equip you to do just that. And so I'm excited about what we're talking about in this episode. And this really kicks off what I am deeming a series of within this season of episodes, and how to truly meet the needs of the community. And so I'm bringing now on someone I've seen and known for years. That don't mean I'm old. It just means I've known her for years, and I've seen her grow up, and I've seen her to really do some great work for Christ and his kingdom. In my other job, because I work in advertising, my other job, a lot of times people have to disclose if there's any connection or relationship with the person. I don't know if I need to do that, but I will do that just for transparency purposes. This is also my daughter, and this is Nalisha Logan, who's on with us today. So welcome, Nalisha. So glad to have you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, Lord, how specific do you want me to be?
Well, I don't know. You know you.
So I am a missional pastor at the Launching Pad Worldwide. I also oversee our worship ministry as well. And then when I'm not doing that, I am also a nurse in the ICU here in Chicago.
Well, first of all, thank you for what you do. And the fact you all, what she just said, that when she's not doing the work of missional pastor, which I don't know if that's even possible, but she said she's also a nurse. And in previous episodes, I've talked about being co-vocational. And it's not just me as the lead servant at the Launching Pad Worldwide that's co-vocational, but also our missional pastors are as well. There's a difference between bivocational and co-vocational. Bivocational, the world's so separated, and that job is kind of means to an end at some point, hoping to be full time, but we're co-vocational. It's really integrated into what we do for Christ, and so and we view our job as a place where we're making disciples, and we get paid while we're doing it, and we're committed to our work. So thank you for that, Nalisha. And again, you all, we're talking in this episode about how to truly meet the needs of the community, and I thought now would be a good time for this series of episodes, because as we've been laying the foundation of a disciple making movement, as we built on that foundation, now let's see what it looks like practically, not just from me, but from someone, as she mentioned, she's a missional pastor, someone who's doing the work and again doing a good job. One of the things we have to be is, Nalisha, we have to be incarnate. And we talk about being incarnate really is being enfleshed. Truth be told, we really, as followers of Christ, can never fully be incarnate. Only Jesus can do that. He came to be enfleshed, but then through our lives, he's incarnate in the places we live, work, learn, and play, because he lives through us. So as we embed ourselves, then we become incarnate and have what's called a missional incarnation impulse, which means we show up in the flesh. We don't just send money. We don't just send prayers. There's nothing wrong with praying, but we don't just send prayers and those praying hand emojis people do sometimes. We don't just send that. We show up in the flesh in our first, second, and third places. So our first place, and Alicia knows this well, it's the community in which we live. And the truth of the matter is, since Jesus is Lord, our home is not our castle, but our home actually is subject to the lordship of Christ. So we get involved in the community in which we live. That includes identifying the needs of the community. Nalisha, as a missional pastor, is responsible for knowing what peace looks like and what the needs are within at least a 5 mile radius of her residence, as a person of peace in the community, and meeting persons of peace also, and then also seeing how God is moving, and then she can follow him to his mission. So before I talk about the second place, let me ask you a question, Alicia. How have you been incarnate where you live?
I would say specifically, I live in Westchester, by the way, which is in the Proviso Township here in Illinois. But I would say I first started by getting to know my neighbors. It's hard to meet the needs of your neighbors and people you're around without actually knowing them and having a relationship with them, besides the hi and bye or wave every now and then when you see them. So I started by getting to know them, first learning their names, their ages, where they live in relation to my house. And if I'm pretty sure other people, other guests who've been on here probably have mentioned this thing called the tic tac toe board, or just the art of neighboring or reneighboring yourself. But so I would say I started with that, getting to know them, learning different things about them. A lot of my neighbors here, especially on my block, are older. A lot of them are retired. They have children that are my age. And so I got to learn like their hobbies, what they like to do now that they're working, what were their previous careers before they retired? Do they have children? Do they have grandchildren? Things of that nature. And then once I started to develop those relationships with them, I started to pray for them, especially going on prayer walks, walking past their house, and just essentially being intentional about engaging them in conversations, not waiting for them to approach me.
Well, one, I mean, there's a lot you said that can be unpacked right there. First of all, thank you for again what you're doing. Thank you for that answer. But one of the things that you said, and for those who have been on previous episodes, I'm talking about engaging with us in previous episodes, then one of the things that you would hear that Alicia said is the idea of, you mentioned prayer walks, the idea of actually inviting people into her life
Mhm.
until they trusted her enough to invite her back into their lives. The idea of Nalisha really slowing down and getting to know her neighbors, not just spending, but using her time wisely to talk to them, to ask questions. And then again, that's why it's good to have guests on, because what guests, particularly in this case Nalisha, gets to do is show the practical application we're talking about. All of us, and we shared on previous episodes, all of us have a shared history, but we all have individual biology. And as Nalisha asked, I would imagine, Nalisha, let me not assume, I would imagine as you talk to them, you mentioned how some of them have children your age and different careers, etc. I would imagine that as you talk to your neighbors, you found out some things you have in common with them, regardless of how old they are.
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
did. I did. I actually found out that my neighbor who lives directly across from me, she was actually a physician. So, we were able to engage in conversations about healthcare. And then I have a dog. So, a lot of times when I'm outside, I have my dog with me. And then that led to her telling me that, oh, since she's retired, she volunteers at a local animal shelter. And so it just one simple detail, one conversation just really sparked us really getting to know more about each other beyond the surface level.
Well, no, thank you for that. And this is good, because I'm thinking about some of the followers of Christ, even in our context, sometimes who think that it's challenging, or say, what do I talk about with people? I don't know what to say to people. And what I've said is, it's just a conversation. It's a conversation. And when you're open to a conversation, one thing leads to another. And it does a couple things. One, it has allowed you to not only be embedded in your community, in the lives of your neighbor, but really to be incarnate, to show up, or let Christ show up through you in the flesh. So people, it takes kind of the mysticism, it takes kind of this ethereal view of, for some who may not know anything about Christ or his kingdom or his church, it takes that away to see that this is what church looks like for us. As Nalisha knows, the definition of church for us at the Launching Pad Worldwide is the presence of Jesus in the people of Jesus everywhere, all the time. And so right there where you live, thank you, yes, to how he's shown up through you, his presence through you, right where you live. That's incredible. That is incredible. That's incredible. So our second place is the community in which we work. Talking about reincarnate, our first, second, and third places. That's the community in which we work. And we should know and be known by the people where we work. In the book, God at Work, Gene Vaith quotes Martin Luther and says, our vocation is a mask of God. What God does is God hides himself in the workplace, the family, the church, and seemingly secular society. And we describe him that way. His presence is much like when a child is hiding in a room, being there yet unseen. To find him in vocation brings him literally down to earth and makes us see how close he really is to us, and transfigures everyday life. And I was thinking about this before I asked you to talk about how you've been incarnate where you work, and letting God be in the flesh through where you work. I really thought about my grand dude, your nephew, DJ. And one of the things, she's laughing, maybe she knows I'm going to say already, but one of the things he used to do, he doesn't do it as much now. He used to, when he would come over and visit, and if someone else came in, if Nalisha came over, or perhaps his grandma, my wife, came in, he would go hide. He would hide. And then he would want us to come find him. And he would say little things like, Papa, tell grandma to find me. Tell TT to find me. And I'm thinking about that when I say that that's what God does. God hides himself in the workplace through us, and then says, Nalisha, tell them to help them find me. Help them find me. Help them know that I'm here. They may not know I'm here, but I'm here through you. So now with that, Nalisha, how some ways you've been incarnate, or Christ has been incarnate through you where you work?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much for coming by the podcast page. I really appreciate it. Hopefully the information that is shared has and will be able to benefit you and also the people you know. Listen, if it has been, or you believe it will benefit you, I'm asking you to do me two favors. First of all, please follow. Yeah, click follow. That way, every time a new episode is released, you will be alerted and you can stay current on everything that we're talking about. But additionally, I'm going to ask that you consider supporting. Your financial support goes a long way to help me help others in the work that we're doing in creating the disciple-making movements. For your monthly or yearly support, not only will you receive access to episodes before everyone else does, but you also will, on a monthly basis, have a live Q&A with me where I will be able to answer questions based on the episodes, the questions you may have and what's been shared. There's only so much that myself and my guests can say during the podcast recordings, but during the live Q&A, we can take a deeper dive into questions you may have, ways that we've seen it play out and work out, and perhaps even some suggestions that you may have that we may be able to comment on to help you and help equip you to help bring the peace of God to the places you live, work, learn, and play. Thank you again for following and for supporting. I appreciate it.
So as I mentioned before, I am a nurse at a level 1 trauma facility here in Chicago. And I'm just amazed at how, God will allow me to interact with certain people, patients, their families. But I do try to intentionally spread God's love and peace where I work. I start each of my days, especially when I'm going into work. I work 12-hour shifts with prayer. I start by praying at home. I pray and listen to worship music as I drive and commute to the hospital. I am continuously praying for my patients after I get a report on them. And I try to pray very specific prayers that when I take care of them, because I do consider it an honor to take care of people, especially when they're at their most vulnerable. Nobody likes to be in the ICU. Nobody likes to be sick. But I pray specifically that when they experience, or even when they have a conversation with me, that they experience God's love and peace. I look for opportunities as I'm talking to them or their family to offer them prayer. Would you like to pray? I reassure them if they're worried or scared or fearful, God is here for you.
I'm interrupting the podcast for a second just to tell you that the audio right here in this section messed up. The rest of it is fine. And Nalisha really was flowing, so I didn't want to interrupt her. I didn't want to ask her to say it over again. I was hoping that in the post-production editing, we could get rid of that, but unfortunately the audio was really bad. But thanks for sticking around. It's well worth it just to hear the rest of what she has to say. So now we're going to go back to our discussion with Nalisha.
Well, that's good. And you know what? It may be where you are right now, because the end of that part of the answer, it kind of broke up a little bit. And when you said that, though, in terms of what you're doing, level 1 trauma center, ICU, and it makes me think of how sometimes people, whoever people are, may think that because the employer does not want us to pray or read our Bibles in our workplace, that it's impossible. And to that, I say, what you just showed is, no, while you may not be able to necessarily stand in the middle of the floor or the unit, have a prayer meeting with people, it doesn't stop you from praying for anyone. And that's the thing, again, with the disciple making movement, everyone, because we're imitators of Christ, because he's living through us, he shows up through us, then we're not limited, restricted, or bound by certain rules. Instead, as Nalisha just said, she can still pray. Now, I would imagine if patients don't mind, she can pray for patients, with patients. But again, regardless of that, they can't stop you from praying for them. And
Yes.
that's the thing I want. I would like, to. I'm glad you said that. I would encourage everyone to remember in a DMM, what they can't do is stop you from praying for. That reminds me of when my wife and I went to the detention center in our area, and we prayed with some of the family members of people who have been detained, um, and then we went to get food and came back, and there was a little tussle there, an argument going on with a couple of people there, and one man we had prayed with asked us to pray with another guy, and I said, I want no prayer. He started walking away, and that's fine. I said, well, I don't have to pray with you, but you can't stop me praying for you. That's the thing. That's the thing. Even I'm thinking about that. Even people who have a criticism or problem with Christ, what they couldn't do is stop him from dying for them.
Yes.
People may not believe that he died. They may not believe he's alive, but he is. He did die. He's alive, and he died for everyone. Now, whether or not people accept or have faith and believe, that's on them, but they can stop from doing it for them. So thank you, Nalisha, thank you for that. And then our third place is where we hang out. That can include the community in which we worship, or our worship center. For us, we don't call it the church; we call it equipment center or the worship center. Then maybe that community, but also it could be somewhere. Ideally, though, it's somewhere within a 1 mile radius of your residence, someplace you can walk to if you want. You can drive your light, but you can walk to if you needed to, and where you're likely to see some of the same people, so you can build social momentum with those same people because you run into them over and over again. Now, describe how you've been incarnate in the places you hang out near your residence. Then.
So I am an avid coffee drinker. So
Yes.
there is probably not a day that goes by where I'm not at my local Starbucks, which is pretty close to where I live. And they know me, I know them. It was so funny because during COVID, they were closed. And I had to go to another Starbucks, and it just wasn't the same because after seeing somebody every day for several years, because I've lived in Westchester since 2018 now. You get to know them, or at least you should, especially if you're seeing them on a daily basis. But they become like family. So for me specifically, because I visit there every day, I just started by simply speaking to them every time I go into Starbucks. Um, Engaging them in conversation. A lot of times, if I don't know what to say to people, I'll just ask them a question or compliment them on something. And a lot of ways to get people to talk to you is to compliment them on something because most people like that. But I started with that, and then just as I'm waiting for them to make my coffee, just talking. It could be about something I've read in the news, something that's going on. A lot of times, if there's a holiday coming up, I'll ask them, "Oh, what are you doing for this holiday?" Or "Are you celebrating?" Or things of that nature. But I try to be intentional about engaging them in conversation, noticing different things about them, and vice versa. It works on my end too, because a lot of times when I'm not working, I'll go there to study. So they'll ask me, "Oh, what are you studying?" And then that leads into a conversation about, "Oh, well, what have you learned, or what's your plan?" And I tell them about, why I'm taking certain courses and where I'm headed career wise. But it becomes a back and forth. But you got to start somewhere, and a lot of times it just starts with a hello. Just simply just start with a hello and try to be intentional. And it may just be a hello for a while, but after having that repeated hello and being friendly and smiling at them, it will develop, and it will go deeper from there.
Well, thank you for that. I'm glad you said that, because it speaks also to the patience, the intentionality, and the persistence that those in disciple making movements have to have. That we can expect to go from hello to, do you believe Jesus is your Lord and Savior? You want to get baptized right now? No, and I'm not criticizing. I know I can do that. or sound like at least, but I'm not criticizing anyone. But again, this is for people who want or interested in, or you start a disciple making movement, and we're talking about organically making disciples, and it starts with the with she said hello, and just naturally, organically letting the Lord again show up through you in that way, in that place. Yes, you see some of the same people. It's interesting. You said that I earlier this summer, this summer, I spoke with a man who was trying to get me on behalf of the luncheon pad to purchase something to help invite people. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. And he literally did not want to get off the phone. I was trying to be polite, and he went to almost fussing at me, trying to tell me how people don't know how to invite people. And he told a story about how many he met someone at a car wash and who worked at this car wash for years, and how many churches per capita this place has, the most in the nation, and how over all the years that man worked there, not one person invited him to church. And he said, what do you think about that? And I said, well, for me, he said, but if we had this thing I'm telling you about, people could have easily just done that and invite him to church. Wow. And I said, well, for me, in our context, the question wouldn't be why you didn't invite him to church, but something you just said, Nalisha. If he sees some same people over and over again, they see him over and over again. My question, and Nalisha knows this, would be, why haven't you introduced yourself to him?
Yep. Or invited him into your life.
Thank
you. That's what we should be doing. We should be inviting people into our lives until they invite us back into theirs. And I mean, that's literally what Jesus did. If you read the word, that's literally what he did everywhere that he went. He wasn't inviting them to a building. He was inviting them into his life and to follow him. And I mean, I think we've kind of complicated things and we've made it more difficult than it needs to be. But all of us can do that.
Thank you. He invited him to a relationship.
This is a good place to end part one of this conversation with Nalisha on how a disciple-making movement helps to meet the needs of the community. In the next episode, we will go further. And you know what? Here's a sneak peek into what we're going to talk about.
Because we're human, we all have some type of bias. Now, a lot of some of it can be conscious, some of it can be unconscious bias, but we have to first recognize that bias and sort of work to counteract that, learn about different cultures from their perspective, like you mentioned, and not our own. But we have to be very culturally sensitive because we want everyone to experience God's love and peace, not just specifically one race, one age, or one demographic.
You do not want to miss that conversation. Before we get out of here, I always end with some questions, inclusive of an I will statement. I tell you what's your I will statement? Because when we get to the end of part two, I have another question I'll ask in addition to I will statement. So I'm going to just ask you, because she gave a lot for us to think about already. What's your I will statement? As a result of you're engaging in this episode, what do you believe the Lord has told you to start or stop? And who are you going to share with to help you be accountable to keep your word as relates to whatever he said? Specifically, though, how a DMM, what does that make a movement, can help you meet the needs of the community in ways that are relevant in your community. Let's take off.